I thank all of you for giving me an opportunity to interact with the team and with the students. Nanotechnological interventions in modern agriculture. And below that is written, size does matter, right? So size does matter. I would like to say it in this way. Does size matter? Because when we are talking about nanotechnology, it is very minuscule particles. We are talking about particles that neither we can see nor we can feel. So we are talking about something which is a ghost particle. We can say that neither we can see them, we can just look at or we can feel their effects, but not the particles themselves. So that way I would like to say, rather than saying that size does matter, I would like to say, does the size matter? Maybe doesn't. Anyway, to the students, directly communicating to the students, this is a presentation about a little bit about what nanoscience or nanotechnology is and what are the possible implications or applications of this technology in agriculture. As you see that every technology has it's a double-sided sword. It has positive impacts also as well as negative impacts also. For example, if you talk about nuclear technology can be used, it can be an alternative for our energy needs for decades to come. On the other hand, nuclear technology can destroy the whole world in a few moments if you go for nuclear warfare. So similarly, nanotechnology is also a technology which, if used wisely, can help us achieve wonderful results. On the other hand, it could lead to disastrous effect if this technology goes out of hand. But at the end, what I can say is that at the end of this presentation, so can you put up a poll that how many students change their socks daily? Is it possible?
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Okay. Or how many students iron their clothes daily? So I'm going to give up a answer to this so that the students will be very happy, because I feel that not many students change their socks daily, or many students do not wash and iron their clothes daily. At least I'm talking about the hostlers.
Okay.
Right? So
Yes,
can we have an immediate poll like how many of them are doing this daily on a daily basis? So what I can tell you is that at the end of this presentation, you will be able to have a solution wherein you will not have to change your socks for at least 3-4 days. Now don't tell me the students कि हम तो सर वैसे भी 4 दिन तक change नहीं करते हैं. But even after this, you won't be able to, and nobody will know also that you haven't changed your socks. But otherwise, if you don't change your socks or if you don't iron your clothes, everybody knows that you are not looking that smart. But while using this technology, leave about agriculture on a personal basis, you will be able to wear the clothes for at least 1 week without anybody else noting that. Fine. So at the end of this presentation, all the students will be happy to know that they can contact the ones which do not change. They will also be happy to know that there is absolutely no need to change your clothes on a daily basis. You can save on soap, you can save on electricity, water, etc., etc. So in a nutshell, you will be able to give a positive imprint on the environment. And on a serious, that was just an introduction. On a serious note, why do we actually need this nanotechnology in agriculture? Now, in India, the population is increasing as the population in the world is increasing, and we are expected to reach around 1.4 billion people in 2020. This figure 1.39 is for January 2020, and soon we will be crossing, or by now we have already must have crossed this. Now, because of this excessive population growth, more and more land is getting diverted towards urbanization, housing, schools, etc. And the fertile land is depleting because it is getting diverted for alternative uses. So that to feed the burgeoning population, we need more and more of our food grains, but we have to produce that food grains from lesser and lesser amount of land which is available. So what we have to do is we have to grow more food from every inch of land that is available to us. Now, alternatives which are available for increasing the yield from every inch of land are molecular breeding or genetic engineering. Apart from these, there are certain other issues which are of prominence. For example, the climate change. We have a increase in CO2 content of the environment. We have to take care of that also, because whatever we do, whatever new technology we bring in, it should have a minimum carbon imprint. So we have this effect of any new technology on environment is a major challenge that has to be kept in mind whenever we are implementing any new scheme or any new technology. Now, in this aspect of increasing the food grains, when we talk about food grains, I don't think that India exactly needs this technology for increasing the food grain production, because we have sufficient amount of food grains in India. Food security is not at all an issue. The issue here is nutritional security. Nutritionally, we are still not having good nutritious food for all of our population, because we have implemented the Food Act. So 100% it's sure that we have sufficient food grains to fill the belly of our citizens. But are we able to give them nutritious food? That's still a question, because we need to have that fulfillment of nutritional quality also. So just wondering whether this nanotechnology can help us to achieve nutritional security also. Now, exactly what is nanotechnology? This nanotechnology, as per definition, the nanotechnology is the design, fabrication, and utilization of materials and devices through the control of matter at nanoscale. That is, what we are trying to do is we are trying to manipulate the matter so that we know that each physical matter has 3 dimensions. It is a 3D entity. Now, if any of the dimensions of a particle of matter is less than 100 nanometers, that falls within the regime of nanomaterial. Of course, at this point of time, because we are dealing with the students, so I'm trying to say this is a very simplified definition of nanotechnology, that any particle, any substance which is present in space having a 3-dimensional entity structure, if any of the dimensions is less than 100 nanometers, it falls within the category of nanoparticle. Now, this nanoparticle, when developed and used for the benefit of humankind, for the benefit of mankind, it turns into nanotechnology. Now, one problem with nanotechnology is neither you can use it nor I can use it. Neither can you use the nanotechnology alone, nor can I use nanotechnology alone. Then the question arises, if neither can you use nor can I use, then who can use? The answer is we both can use. Separately, nobody can be a master of nanotechnology, because it is a highly interdisciplinary field. It has manifestations in various different kinds of fields. For example, physics, chemistry, biological science, material science, information technology, agriculture, etc. In physical sciences, nanotechnology has gone far away as compared to its application in biology or in agriculture. For in agriculture, in biology, it's still a nascent field, maybe at the most 10 to 15 years old, that is 1.5 decades old. But in other fields, it has taken giant leaps and it has completely changed the scenario in, for example, in aeronautical sciences, in information technology. In those cases, nanotechnology has done wonders. But we started quite late of its applications in agriculture. But definitely, at this point of time, the take-home point from this slide, the message I want to give from this slide is that nanotechnology cannot be practiced in isolation. It is an interdisciplinary science. We have to integrate and talk to other people from other disciplines, and then only we can come up with a feasible or a good application in any field. May it be agriculture, may it be biotechnology, may it be fisheries, veterinary sciences, etc., etc. So we, as a biologist, have to cross-talk with a chemist, with a physicist, etc. if we want to come out with a practical, useful process or a product. Okay. Now, just to get this nanotechnology, at least in the last 5-10 minutes, I must have used this word maybe 20-50 times. Now, exactly what this nanotechnology or nanoscale is, just to have an idea about this, that what is nanoscale? Now, an Earth is about 100 million times, it is 0.1 billion times bigger than a football. We must have, all of us have an idea about how big a football is, and we can at least imagine the size of, if we close our eyes, we can imagine the size of our Earth. So the ratio of the size of our Earth to that of a football is the same as the ratio of the size of a football to that of a nanoparticle. Representative of this nanoparticle we have written is at buckyball, which is just made up of, it is spherical structure made up of carbon, which is a nanoscale material. So the ratio between the Earth to the football is same as football to the nanomatter or the nanomaterial. So this comparison gives us at least a sense of size, that at what size we are playing. We are playing at a very, very small size. So again, at this point of time, I put up the question, does the size matter? Maybe again, after some time, we will put up this question again. Now, nanotechnology, just to understand this technology or the basics of this technology a little bit before we move on to the application side, because this is definitely not a new science. It has been in existence for decades and I should not say decades, for centuries and centuries it has been in existence. We'll talk about the applications of these nanoscience and nanotechnology in yesteryears also. But before we move on to the application or the practical side, let's first try to understand that what this actually nanoscience or nanotechnology is. As we just a couple of slides back, we said creation of useful materials, devices and systems through the manipulation of matter at nanoscale constitutes what is known as nanoscience or nanotechnology. Now, generally, nanotechnology deals with structures of size between 1 to 100 nanometer, at least in one dimension. Maybe there are 3-dimensional entities, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, or all the 3 dimensions could be in less than 100 nanometer scale. But again, I'm emphasizing here that this is a definition which applies for a layperson who is getting introduced to nanoscience. Again, I get stuck up here because of the lack of response from the students. Just if you go a little deeper and move slightly sidewise from this slide, how can we understand that all the different kinds of elements, they have different electronic structures. There are metals, there are heavy metals, there are transition metals. Is it possible that once their structure, their size comes less than 100 nanometers, they all get converted to nanomaterials? It seems a little puzzling. At least to me, it seems it's a puzzle that there are so many different kinds. There are metals, there are non-metals. All different types of elements, once their size comes below 100 nanometers, it amazingly gets changed into a nanomaterial. It doesn't, scientifically, it doesn't convince me. So what actually happening is that when we keep on reducing the size, the properties of matter change. And this change in properties occurs at different size for different elements. It is not a standard that 100 nanometer is a cutoff line, that after 100 nanometer everything will convert into a nanomaterial. No, it's not like that, because different matter, different elements, different substances have different electronic structure. They have different physical as well as chemical properties. So this is a general criteria of defining what a nanoparticle or a nanomaterial is. Okay, so we have to go deeper into the science, into the physics of a matter to understand how can we specifically define a nanomaterial. But just for our sake of understanding, because we are here concerned about the size, that the size becomes smaller and smaller, and at a time the size becomes so small that the physical as well as chemical properties of a matter start to change. Now the properties change because the laws governing this matter also start to change. If there is a matter of a mega size, a big size particle, it is governed, its movement in space is governed in 3 dimension is governed by the laws of classical physics. But once we reduce the size to such a low proportion that it enters into the realm of nanomaterial, it starts getting governed by the different set of laws. That is, now the laws of quantum physics govern the behavior of this particular nanomaterial. We'll again come back to this topic in the coming slides. At this point of time, what is the advantage of this nanosciences? That it gives us an opportunity to develop any product atom by atom. We have two different approaches for synthesizing nanomaterials. Either we go for top down or bottom up approaches. And there are two approaches. If we have a larger material, we cut it down, we keep on cutting it down to smaller pieces and smaller pieces. Then we are converting a big size material into small size material. Sorry. So that constitutes a top-down approach. That is, we are coming from a bigger particle to a smaller particle. Alternatively, we can add up smaller particles, subatomic particles, to make a particle of the size which comes into the division of nanomaterial. So that is how we are saying that atom by atom manipulation is there for the bottoms-up approach, and we can devise or design a particular product at the atomic level precision. That means which atom has to follow which atom, we can design that. So that's the beauty of developing a nanomaterial. And that's not possible in any other science, because at the atom level, we cannot be so precise. So this nanoscience gives us an ability, it empowers us to develop a material at atomic level. That is, we can have the space, the numbering, as well as the sequence of various atoms which are placed in a matter of our choice. Now, why this nanotechnology or nanoscience is fascinating is because the behavior or the physical, chemical, as well as the optical properties of these nanomaterials are quite different from their macro counterparts. Why they are so, we'll see just in a second. Just to understand that, we have been saying just reducing, as we just discussed, that we can bring down the size to the nanometer size by just cutting down the matter into smaller pieces, smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. So how does it matter? This particular size tries to explain that by taking an analogy. Now, in the first part, there is a bigger molecule. On the surface of it, whether we take a bigger molecule or a smaller molecule, both of them are passing or are rolling onto a plane surface. But actually, that plane surface, if you go below, sorry, that plane surface is not exactly plane. So there are ridges in between that plane surface. If the size is big enough, the ball will keep on rolling above these troughs and ridges. But if the size becomes small, then it has to enter in, the ball has to enter into the pit, again climb up, again enter into the pit, climb up. So this is the way this smaller particle is going to traverse this space, which on the surface of it seems to be a very plain one. On the other hand, if it is a bigger particle, it can smoothly sail over this. Taking just another analogy, for example, there are small pits on the road. If you are moving in an Activa, you are bound to have experienced more jerks as compared to when you are moving in an SUV. Why nowadays people prefer SUVs is because they have bigger tires. So bigger tire means macro particles. Smaller Activa tires, just like nanoparticles. Bigger tires can smoothly sail over the pits which are present on the road, while on the other hand, the smaller tires have to enter into the pit, they go inside and then come out. Good thing or bad thing, doesn't matter. We will talk about it a little later. It was just an example to make you understand that how just decreasing the size changes the overall interaction of the particle with its surroundings. Now, is it at this point of time, let us ask ourselves that is it something new? Is it a science which has just been discovered maybe 10 or 15 years back? No, it's a very, very ancient science, and people have been using it since civilizations. Only thing is we have started exploring its applications now more vigorously. For example, we have been talking about the Swarn Bhasma for ages. Now what this Swarn Bhasma has, it has just nano-sized particles of gold and silver, which are helpful in increasing the vigor and in increasing our immunity. That way, that way, nanotechnology has been in practice for ages. What is still a mystery is that these nanoparticles, how are they improving the immunity for gold and silver? How are they increasing our vigor? In what way are they acting? Are they directly acting and increasing the immunity of the system, or is it that they are activating certain cellular enzymes or certain DNA machinery, certain cellular machinery is activated in response to these nanoparticles, which facilitates increase in the immunity or increase in vigor? Or in sometimes we also have, if you take nanoparticles of some other heavy metal of some other metals, heavy metals or alkaline earth metals, we can have a negative impact also on our health. So we still are in the process of exploring that whether we are experiencing the changes at the nano level just because of the presence of these nanoparticles, or is it that they are activating something at the cellular, at the DNA and the protein level? We are quite late in realizing the potential of these nanoparticles. Plants have been synthesizing them. It is not that we only are talking about nanoparticles, we have discovered something great. Plants have been using these nanoparticles since ages. They are accumulating nanoparticles within their tissues for specific purposes. Now plants have realized the potential of these nanoparticles much faster as compared to human beings. Even just to mention, we have not put up any slide here, even the insects, they also accumulate nanoparticles in their bodies. So you just I take a glass of water. In the meantime, you can just have a glimpse of how does the size matter. For example, when we are talking about DNA, it has a diameter of 20 angstrom units or 2 nanometers. That's the average diameter of DNA. We move up. This is a ATPase, which is the ATP synthesizing machinery present inside the mitochondria. It has a size of around 10 nanometers. If you would have seen that covering picture, I have put up a picture of COVID-19 virus. That viruses also come into the range of nanoparticles because the head and total the tail length, they again are less than 100 nanometers. So they also are covered under the nanoscience and nanotechnology release. So this slide just gives you an idea about the shapes and sizes of various structures which we study under nanoscience. In the meantime, I will just keep on progressing with the slides. Now, we said that we are doing absolutely nothing but chopping down the particles to smaller sizes. Now, after that, we said that bringing the size down to the level of nano, that is 100 or less than 100 nanometers, it changes their chemical as well as physical properties and optical properties, of course, which is a part of physical properties. Now, why this changes? Why the changes in the physical and the chemical properties happen? Because if, for example, if there is a big brick of gold, if you break it down into smaller biscuits, gold, they will still be gold, they will still be yellow, right? So what happens when we just keep on chopping down the gold particles into smaller and smaller and further smaller pieces? The gold will remain gold, it will remain yellow, but only till it is governed by the laws of classical physics. Once it enters into the scale of nanometers, the yellow color of the gold will not remain yellow. It will start turning towards red. And depending upon how smaller the gold particles are, the color of gold will keep on changing. So let's try to understand what happens. Why are these changes occurring just because of reduction in the size? Okay, So let's try to understand. For example, if we are bringing down the size decreases, so the mass also decreases, or the weight of the matter also decreases. Now, due to this small size, the gravitational force which is acting upon that particle also decreases. More the mass, higher is the gravitational pull experienced by that particular substance. As the size keeps on decreasing, the gravitational force becomes negligible. When it enters into the realm of nanoparticle, that is less than 100 nanometers, the gravitational force becomes negligible. But on the other hand, the electromagnetic forces, the forces with which these atoms or molecules interact with each other, these electromagnetic forces become much more dominant. At the macro size, that is when the particle is large, these electromagnetic forces are not that dominant, they are negligible, but gravitational forces are dominant. But when we reduce the size, the reverse happens. Gravitational forces become negligible and electromagnetic forces become dominant. Now, what will happen because of that? If the gravitational force is negligible or the electromagnetic forces become dominant, what is the effect? Effect is here, the Brownian motion, for example. That's the third point. That if the size becomes smaller, the movement becomes faster, the diffusion rate becomes higher. So that affects their chemical properties. On the other hand, when the matter becomes small, it attains, rather than a particle behavior, it enters into a dual character behavior, that is wave-like as well as particle-like. So that at that point of time, that this is the definition, that when a particle of any substance, any element, when it attains a dual character, that of a wave and a particle, or when its behavior is governed by the laws of quantum physics, at that point of time we can say that it has entered, or it has been transformed into a nanoparticle. Okay. Now, another important area which changes, or any property which changes when we chop down the particles to smaller sizes, is that the surface area to volume ratio increases significantly. The volume will become, the volume, let's say, if it remains constant, but the surface area will keep on increasing. So the surface area to volume ratio will become much higher, increased. So the number of, what I'm trying to say here is that if we say, let's say, imagine, you can close your eyes and imagine that we have a ball, a football, and a football chopped up into smaller balls. If the surface area is more, the number of particles or the molecules which are present on the surface of that particular matter or that particular element will increase tremendously. And when the number of molecules at the surface increase, the reactivity of that particular substance increases, because these are the molecules at the surface which are in contact with the environment, which are giving rise to its chemical as well as physical properties, more so chemical properties. So once the surface area increases, the number of particles which are present on the surface goes on increasing, and the reactivity of that particular substance also increases. Let's think about it in the biological sense. If we have a catalyst, a big catalyst as well as chopped down into smaller pieces, smaller particle of catalyst will be much more effective in catalyzing the reaction as compared to a single large catalyst. So that's a simple example to explain how this increase in surface area to volume ratio impacts the chemical properties of a nanomaterial. Third, another important thing is when the size becomes smaller than the wavelength of light, then what will happen is the light which is falling onto the particles will not be reflected back, because whatever we see is a reflection of the light which is getting reflected back from a particular object which we want to visualize. So if the size of the matter which we want to visualize becomes less than the wavelength of light, that particle or that matter becomes transparent or it becomes invisible. And that's the beauty कि हम लोग उन चीजों से ज्यादा डरते हैं जो हमें दिखाई नहीं देती हैं as compared to जो चीज हमें दिखाई देती है. आदमी दिखाई देता है उससे डर नहीं लगता है, भूत है जो दिखाई नहीं देता है उससे डर ज्यादा लगता है. Am I right? So once these particles, the macro particles, become invisible, then it seems that there is nothing in the space and something is still happening. So that's enter into the realm of fascination. Now let's try to see what happens by decreasing the size of the matter. You see here the particle size, these are titanium oxide dispersions. Now here the particle size is 195 nanometers, that are around approximately 200 nanometers. These are the different skin types, light colored skin as well as dark colored skin. So as we keep on decreasing the size of these titanium oxide solutions, slowly and slowly, when they reach around 15 to 20 nanometers, depending upon the skin color, the base color of the skin, they become transparent. If you are putting this, mind you, for the girl students, now this titanium oxide is an ingredient of sunscreen creams. I hope you people must have seen cricketers when they are specifically playing in Australia, etc. They put up something on their cheeks. Now this is only the dispersions of titanium oxide. Now what this is doing is, this titanium oxide, yeah, this is here. So this zinc oxide as well as titanium oxide, these are the UV blocking agents which are present in sunscreens. So if the particle size is around 200 nanometers, you will have something like this on the cheeks. You must have seen these white colored smears on the face of cricketers who are playing in direct sunlight. But would any of you like to have this sunscreen? Of course, we know that sunscreens are protective in nature. They will protect us against bad, harmful effects of UV lights. But will any of you like to put up these sunscreens on your face? I don't think so. But as you might have understood by now, if same zinc oxide or titanium oxide particles, if we keep on decreasing the size, slowly and slowly, they will become invisible like this. So once they are invisible, definitely we can use them because of their protective effect. We can use them in sunscreens. The science behind that, scattering of visible light, is influenced by particle size, as we said, and the difference between the refractive index of the pigment and the surrounding media, right? That's what we have been using here in sunscreen lotions. You see this particle size, if the particle size is around 50% of the wavelength of light, then it becomes completely invisible, right? So this is how we are using the reduction in size to our practical application. Other size dependent, as we are talking about the size of the gold. See, this is the gold particles. If you keep on decreasing their size, they will remain as yellow colored materials. Even if you cut the block of gold into smaller and smaller pieces, little pieces, it will still be a yellow gold. But this does not hold true when we decrease the size up to a level of nanos. If you see here, it is 2 nanometers to 150 nanometers, a range of different reddish colors to orangish color particles. This is also gold nanoparticles. Again, gold, but at different sizes, 2 nanometers, 5 nanometers, and ranging up to 150 nanometers. You can see the change in the range of colors of gold. Now, as this slide just tells us that there are two different mechanisms of synthesizing these nanoparticles. Either we have a bottom-up approach, wherein we are building up the matter atom by atom, and other approaches, the top-down approach, wherein we are breaking down the larger particles into smaller particles. Of course, this will be what are the pros and what are the cons of both the approaches, and what are the sizes or what are the applications in which we use the bottom-up approach, and in what applications we use the top-down approach. This is again a matter of another different presentation. But at this point of time, just to know that, as we have discussed earlier, that there are two different approaches of synthesizing these nanomaterials. One is the bottom-up approach and other is the top-down approach. Of course, as it is written, bottom-up approach, we are building the material atom by atom. So there will be more precise output and less wastage. Top-down approach, wastage will be more, but the techniques which are required to develop nanoparticles will be less costlier as compared to bottom up. So both trying to underline that bottom up as well as top down approaches, both are equally relevant in the development of nanomaterials. It depends upon what kind of application we are up to. That determines whether we have to follow the bottoms-up approach or the top-down approach. Okay, now slowly and slowly we are moving on from the nanoparticles to the application side. Now this particular slide gives you an overall idea about what could be the different applications of nanomaterials in various fields of human endeavor. We can have agriculture, we can have nutraceuticals, nutrient delivery, we can have products, packaging products, wherein we can increase the shelf life of foods, of our food materials. We can have nano barcoding, wherein just rather than, you know, when you go to buy a bottle of Coke or a bread, it is always written onto that what is the date of packing and how long can we use it. Maybe 3 days or 4 days after packing, we can use that. So we have to, for at least for people of my age, they have to put up their glasses and look very specifically where is it written, what is the time span of, or the shelf life of a particular product which is present in a market. If rather than looking at that number, if just the color of the packaging material could tell us whether this is good enough for consumption or not, will that not be better? Nano packing materials can help us achieve that end. Number one, they can increase the shelf life of matter, of the matter which the material which has been packaged. Plus, they also make it easier to identify whether a product has passed its active shelf life or is it still consumable. So that's some of the aspects wherein we can have the application. You can imagine the application of nanomaterials. Now, one thing I again like to emphasize here, as I was saying in the beginning, nanoscience or nanotechnology is definitely not a new science. It only dwells on the broadness of our imagination. How broad can we imagine to develop newer applications of this particular area of science? Basic principles remains the same. Okay, only thing is how beautifully we can imagine a new application of this smaller size particles. That only limits our application. Now, the Western world, they are far ahead of us in developing these nano products, and a number of nano products are already in the market. Although in India we are lagging behind. Of course, you will be amazed, at least we have 20 to 30 different nano products already available in the market. So we are not that behind, and more so we are ahead in case of agriculture and biological sciences. Western world is ahead of us in case of physical science, in devising materials which can make the, let's say, an aeroplane or a missile invisible. You must have heard about stealth technology, right? Or batteries which can give you, for example, you must be using everybody now uses a cell phone. The main problem with cell phone is that you have to charge it every day or at least every alternate day, right? Of course, if you are using a MI phone, you can use it for 2-3 days simultaneously. But if you are using an Apple, those who are using Apple, they are frustratingly low in their energy requirements and energy storage requirements, and they need to be charged maybe twice a day. So if we can have, imagine we can have batteries which can give us a month's charging time, and they can be charged as fast as maybe a few minutes or maximum half an hour. So that will be wonderful. So such kind of storage device, such kind of electrical storage devices are under construction, and soon in maybe the next decade we will have electronic batteries which can give us a talk time or screen on time in case of mobile phones to as long as a month. Now moving on to another fascinating, before we move on to the actual area of agriculture applications, now this DNA nanotechnology. Now I think most of us are aware of the use of DNA in forensic sciences. Yes, for example, if a child is lost, we take out the DNA of the child and then matches it. Let's suppose there are two pairs of parents who are claiming the right over the child. We can match their DNA, and the DNA can, without any ambiguity, can tell us the child belongs to which pair of parents, right? So DNA is the identifying material in case of parentage disputes. Similarly, but at this point of time, we do not have any computer which can be identified by its DNA. At this point of time, how do we identify a DNA? Sorry, I'm so sorry. How do we identify a computer? We identify a computer by virtue of its IP address, right? But maybe after a decade, we will have much more efficient computers. By the way, let's deviate a little bit. You know the SoC, what does the SoC stand for? Now, smaller the size of a system on chip, the transistors, for example, we are moving from 10 nanometers to 12 nanometers and 10 nanometer, and the latest and the most costliest mobile phones use 7 nanometers chips. Smaller the size of these transistors or the chips, more efficient and more powerful are these machines. The processing power becomes much higher. Similarly, now scientists are trying to develop computers which do not use transistors for conducting the current of for making the calculations. They use DNA because DNA also has a negative charge because of the phosphate groups. They also have electrons and on the periphery, so they can also be used in a similar way as we use the SoCs. So maybe, although at this point of time you may think it to be a distant dream or maybe an unrealistic proposition, but surely in the decades to come we will see DNA playing an internal transistor and transition role in case of our electronic devices. Now, how does this property of DNA being used in the electronic devices comes around? That comes around because of a property called DNA origami. You must have heard about paper origami. Similarly, because the DNA can self-assemble into a double helical or a triple helical structure depending upon the sequence of nucleotides in a particular strand. So in this case, we can design different shapes of semiconductors based on the sequence of nucleotides present in a specific DNA. So that's how this whole concept of using DNA for carrying out current inside an electronic device originates. Okay, now let's coming down to the main topic, that's nano in agriculture. Nanotechnological applications in agriculture, they are for two main purposes. Either, as we discussed earlier, food security is not an issue, at least in our country, but nutritional security is. So we need to produce more nutritious food. Plus, another important aspect for the whole world is environmental safety, the carbon footprint. So if we are using conventional fertilizers, they have a larger and a bigger environmental footprint as compared to nano-sized fertilizers. We'll see in a moment. So these are the two issues. We have to produce more nutritionally secure, we have to nutritionally healthy food, as well as save our environment from the toxic effects of pesticides and fertilizers, etc. So with these two things in mind, we will devise various uses of these nanoparticles or nanomaterials in agriculture. What are the challenges before us? We have to break the yield barrier. That means most of us are not very comfortable. Let's put it very plain. Most of us are not very comfortable with genetic engineering. At least in India, we have only one crop which is commercially available, but even the indigenously developed brassica, transgenic brassica, was not allowed for commercial cultivation. So we in India, maybe because of reasons best not discussed at this platform, will not try to discuss whether this is a good technology or a bad technology, because this is not a platform to discuss that. But we must admit that at least in India, genetic engineering, or what we call as recombinant DNA technology, is not very well accepted. Although on a personal front, I would like to say that this is a technology we can just change your fortune. But maybe because of socio-political issues, we are not into that. So one thing is, we have to, coming back to the present slide, we have to break this yield barrier without resorting to genetic engineering. Second, we have to develop efficient and reliable diagnostics. For example, if there is a disease incidents in the field, if we are able to detect that at a young stage, at an earlier stage, we can control the damage. So if we have reliable and quick diagnostic techniques, then it will be a fortune for us. Second is efficient management of pests and diseases. This has more to do, because I think for diseases we have already developed certain insecticides or pests. For pests we have pesticides, but there are some diseases, for example Alternaria blight, we do not have any known resistance in the wild. So in such cases where we do not have any known resistance, which we can use for breeding purposes, we have to resort to nanotechnology. So these are some of the challenges wherein we have seen application of this nanotechnology. We have seen successful application of these nanotechnologies. Simply we say is you prefix nano and then you have everything else which is existing. We have nano fertilizers, nano fungicides, nano pesticides, nano sensors, nano diagnostics, of course nano packaging as we discussed earlier, and what we call it as smart delivery system. That means we are not changing the matter, but we are changing the way we are delivering that particular content. Now let's first talk about the fertilizers, which you call as smart fertilizer. In smart fertilizers, what we are doing is, when we say smart fertilizer, there are two things to this. One is when we are using the fertilizers, most of that leaches out into the soil, carrying or giving us two negative impacts. Number one, it contaminates the groundwater. Number two, the fertilizer use efficiency, or what we call as nutrient use efficiency, is very low, because the very low percentage, it varies from maybe for nitrogen and phosphorus, there are different nutrient use efficiencies. So the nutrient use efficiency varies from plant to plant as well as from soil to soil. Now these are the two negative points, that we are not able to utilize the full capacity of our fertilizers. Here nanotechnology can help us by developing these nano fertilizers. What these nano fertilizers are going to give us, they will be using less of the fertilizing material, and that even that less amount of fertilizing material will be available to the plant for a longer duration of time, so that they have more time to absorb this. India ranks third in fertilizer production and color. These are just the issues with our current crop of chemical fertilizer, that their cost is high. They have high cost, contaminate, as we said, the groundwater. Of course, because of their chemical manufacturing techniques, they have a high carbon footprint also. That's a major concern. And as we said, they have a decreased nutrient use efficiency. Now these are some of the products which are already in use. They are defined as nanoparticles or nanomaterial based fertilizers, which can supply the essential nutrients for plant growth and fertility. Now how come these nano fertilizers are different from conventional fertilizers? Now, one thing is, we can use these nano encapsulated nutrients. We are using the same kind of nutrients, but we are encapsulating them into certain porous substances like zeolite or nanoclay. Nanoclay you are much more familiar with. Zeolite is I think it is aluminium silicate. Okay, so these are again this zeolite and nanosilicate is also highly porous substance, just like nanoclay. So they can be used to cover up our fertilizers, and these fertilizers will be encapsulated inside these porous materials, so that they are not just released at one burst. Slowly they will keep on leaching out from these porous materials and keep on releasing the nutrients to the soil. Delivered as nanoparticles. Now we have seen that. Later on I will tell you the results of our experiments also. Gold and silver, and literature also reports titanium oxide. These have given wonderful results in increasing our productivity. Normally we say that if a plant is able to, any technology, for example genetic engineering, if it is able to increase the productivity by 10%, it is able to recover the cost of development of that particular technology. But in this case, we got up to 16 to 17% enhancement in productivity by using engineered nanoparticles in field in case of brassica. Of course, why we were not able to successfully commercialize these products, we'll talk about that also a little later. But these, at this point of time, we would like to say that these nano fertilizers can help us in increasing the productivity by altering the cellular machinery. Just to show you an example, already published material. This is a control plant, and this is a plant wherein carbon nanotubes. These carbon nanotubes are very small hollow tubes which can store water inside them. Now these water storage devices, they help the plant to gain water when there is a shortage or when there is a dehydration conditions. Whenever the loss of water is there, even when the soil loses moisture much more faster as compared to these carbon nanotubes. So these carbon nanotubes are, because of they are porous and they can still retain water when most of the moisture in the soil is lost. So that way they help just by providing, they do not have any fertigation effect. Only thing these carbon nanotubes are doing, what they are doing is they are simply retaining water and providing the water in times of need. So that's the only thing. But of course, there is a negative side to it also, that these on long-term use, these are carcinogenic in nature and they are also toxic to certain insects. As we said in the beginning, both. We have to very judiciously use this nanotechnology because it has a positive effect also, it has a very highly negative effects also on the environment as well as on the plants. Basically, it is a concentration and size dependent game. As we are talking about zeolite, so again, zeolite, we have already the material is already available in the market. Now these are honeycomb like structures with a porous structure through which our fertilizer can slowly be released into the soil. Now we come down to pesticides, because pesticide contamination of food is still a major problem, because that's how the market of organic foods is increasing, because of the presence of these pesticides in our food, in our fruits as well as vegetables. So people are moving more and more towards organic foods. Of course, organic foods are much more costlier as compared to the normally produced foods, and there are strict government guidelines also to produce that food. So at the moment they are not being consumed at a mass scale. So what the disadvantages of using the conventional chemical pesticides are that use of conventional pesticides has a negative and of course cost is involved impact on the farm, since they ironically help breed more numerous and stronger pests. Fine, because even if a couple of pests escape the effect of these pesticides, they become immune, or they develop their immune system so that they become much more resistant to that particular concentration and type of pesticide. So that next time when we spray that pesticide, the pesticides are much more stronger and they are able to survive the spray of pesticides. Second, these pesticides just not kill the target pests, but they also have a negative impact on their naturally beneficial predators also. And last but not the least, the pesticides end up as pesticides residues in our foods also. At this point of time, let me be very clear that through the introduction of nanopesticides, we are not giving a complete substitute of the conventional pesticides. Here, we are only trying to reduce their footprint because of reduction in the amount or the quantity of pesticides used to attain the same level of results. So trying to underline that at this point of time, by using nanopesticides, we are using the similar kind of materials as we use in conventional pesticides, but by using nanopesticides, we are decreasing their quantity much less. So that way their environment footprint will be reduced. Now again, we have this nanoscale encapsulation of pesticides. pesticides is encapsulated inside the artificially synthesized nanomaterials so that it is released over a longer period of time. The level of sustenance in the soil is higher. Nanomaterial are artificially synthesized in such a way that it facilitates the release of pesticide only in the targeted environment. This is true. This same is true, for example, in case of fertilizers also. For example, there are now biosensors available wherein a particular biosensor is able to judge or able to sense the level of a particular nutrient, let's say nutrient or moisture level inside the soil, and only when the plant or the soil demands the release of that particular nutrient, our encapsulated material releases that particular nutrient. So there are certain biosensors available. For example, they can sense the pH of the soil, they can sense the moisture level of the soil. In that way, they are able to release these nutrients or the whatever matter is encapsulated in these balls, in these encapsulated nanoballs, so that only at a specific time these ingredients are released into the soil. So that way we have a time specific release as well as sustained release. Another thing is, as we said in the beginning, when we are talking about the basic concept of how these nanomaterials work, we said that smaller the size, more is the number of molecules at the surface, because surface area to volume ratio is highly increased. In this case, it has been shown practically that the same level of results, same level of efficacy can be achieved by using much lower doses of pesticides as compared to the conventional pesticides. So if you are reducing the dose, for example, copper sulfate is used in various pesticides. So if we reduce the dose, we are able to save our environment of this toxic effects of copper. Now, fungicides, silver is, of course, as you must be knowing, has a very great potential as an antimicrobial agent. Now, in the beginning, the students will recall I was saying that they can wear their clothes without washing for a longer period of time. Now, how is that possible? That is possible because the bad smell which comes out of your clothes is because of bacteria. And this silver is a very potent antibacterial agent. If we impregnate these silver particles inside our clothes at the time of weaving of the fabric, then these become toxic to the bacteria, and the bacterial population is not allowed to grow onto the clothes. So that way they do not allow bacteria to grow, and we can use our clothes. Of course, I'm not advocating that, but this is one way, more so for the hostlers, that they can use their clothes for a longer period of time. For example, we have certain hydrophobic nanomaterials. If we inculcate or if we introduce our hydrophobic nanoparticles inside our shirts, then even if what will be the effect? Even if you spill something on your shirt, it will simply roll down your shirt and it will not soil your shirt. It will not damage or it will not dirty your shirt or your clothes. It will simply be a water soluble material. It will roll down from your shirt, and your shirt will be as clean as ever. Similarly, when we talk about silver, nano silver at this is much less toxic to humans and animals, and it can safely be consumed to a larger concentration. And this silver has been a major ingredient of number of fungicides. Another area where we can have this benefit of nanomaterials is plant diagnostics, wherein we are developing diagnostic kits, wherein we are tagging our antibodies. Now, these basically nano diagnostic kits, they are based on antigen antibody reactions, wherein the antibody is tagged with a particular kind of fluorescent nanomaterial. For example, they are quantum dots, which on changing the protein conformation, they change the light being emitted. Am I able to make myself clear? For what we are doing in nanodiagnostics is that we have an antigen which is present in a pathogen. Against that pathogen antigen, we develop our antibodies. Now, these antibodies are tagged with a specific kind of quantum dot. Quantum dot is a specific kind of nanomaterial which emits light. That means which can be detected visually. So whenever these antigens, and because we are using nano-based diagnostics, the amount of antigen which is required to bring about the antigen-antibody reaction is very low, so that it can detect very low quantities of antigen. So when we have this reaction, visually we can see that visually means it is a real-time quantification assay, that real-time diagnostic and very precise assay, so that when there is an antigen-antibody reaction, it will emit a specific kind of light, the quantum dots. So thereby we can find out the presence or absence of an antigen in a given sample. Okay, so this is just an example of what we have been using, what we have been trying to develop. Now, nanotechnology can improve this. As we said, nano will increase the efficiency as well as on-field detection, and at a much earlier stage, so that the damage caused by the pathogen is less as compared to using the normal diagnostics. An example where we, I've just to remind you that little bit earlier we were talking about the alternaria management. We said that there is no, to the best of my knowledge, maybe because I should not be, I'm quite afraid in dwelling in these matters, because I'm talking with people from agriculture college and this is not my domain. But as I understand that there is no wild resistance against alternaria blight. What we have been able to see here is that if we spray silver nanoparticles, we were using these silver nanoparticles on a different aspect. We were trying to understand the level of changes in certain proteins inside the brassica on exposure to silver nanoparticles. But simultaneously, when we observed that the infestation of this alternaria blight was much less in those plants which were sprayed with nano formulations as compared to the control ones. Although both were growing in the same field under the same conditions, but these application of these nano formulations, there was nano silver and nano gold we were using differently. So they were able to protect the crop from the alternaria blight also. So that's, although this was because I work in abiotic stress, so that was not my area of research, but that was one of the observation wherein we could see that these nanoparticles could also be used to protect a plant, at least we can say about brassica, from alternaria blight. Similarly, here the Tarafdar et al, they have clearly shown the effect of nanophosphorus as nutrient as compared to the normal phosphorus application. And here we just see the, as we are talking about the pesticide, just see the amount which you are using for achieving the same level of productivity. Conventional 80 kg per hectare compared to 640 milligram per hectare. Here we are talking about milligram, we are talking about kilogram, milligram, gram, and then kilogram. 1 million times difference. So that's the level of, that's the power of nano. If you imagine the same kind of power being utilized in development of our pesticides, how much environmental load we can decrease, we can reduce just by using nanopesticides. Again, these are some of the examples wherein in pathology, wherein we can use we can have the use of nanomaterials. Is it only on paper, or is it that things have entered into the market also? So this is just a small list of commercially available nano-based products which have already entered into the market. Now coming down to any scientist who is making a presentation, he will not go back satisfied unless and until he or she has talked about something about what they are doing. अगर मैंने ये नहीं बताया कि मैं क्या कर रहा हूं, तो आत्मा को शांति मिलती नहीं है, चाहे वो आपके टॉपिक से रिलेटेड हो या ना हो. बट हमें ये जरूर बताना है एज ए साइंटिस्ट के साथ हम क्या कर रहे हैं, राइट? तो ऑफ कोर्स आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट आई एम टोटली ऑफ द मार्क, वी आर आल्सो इनटू दिस, बट more important things will come in a couple of slides later. Here what we have been using is, we have been using gold as well as silver nanoparticles and their combination, their formulations, to study the effect on cell growth and productivity. Here we have seen that these are the control plants, roots. We are using these nanoparticles through foliar spray. So the level of nanoparticles in the leaf tissue, in the aerial tissue, is much higher as compared to the root tissue. But at least these figures tell us that the nanoparticles can travel from the leaf tissues to the root tissues. Now, we were more interested in looking at how these nanoparticles are acting. Now, these nanoparticles, these MAP kinase are certain signaling molecules for, let's not go into the details, but at least you should have an idea that these are the signaling molecules which initiate the defense response of a plant. Whether we are talking about the biotic stresses or whether we are talking about the abiotic stresses, these MAP kinases, like when these nanoparticles are entering into the plant, they initiate certain responses, certain manifestations will help us to alter the expression level of these MAP kinases. There are different kinds of MAP kinases and there are different levels of MAP kinases. Okay, for example, we have MAP kinase, we have MAP kinase, and the third level is MAP kinase. What they are doing is, these are simple enzymes which either add up a phosphate group, okay, to various proteins or various enzymes and make them active. Now, these proteins are involved in biotic as well as abiotic stresses. So, how these nanoparticles manifest their effect inside a plant is that they are altering the level of expression of various kinases, which are the signaling molecules, which further manifest their effect on the activity of various enzymes involved in biological processes. So this slide these are effect of silver nanoparticles, just to make you understand that these treatment of these nanoparticles brings about changes in the expression level of genes which are regulating various biological processes. And of course, one thing which comes into this is that this whole game of using nanomaterials or nanoparticles is a concentration dependent game. For example, if you see here, in this case, control S5 means silver, 5 ppm, 10 ppm, 25 ppm, and 50 ppm. So this keeps on increasing. The expression level of MAP kinase keeps on increasing. On the other hand, when we talk about the effect on kinase 4, MAP kinase 4, the maximum effect is seen at 5 ppm of silver concentration treatment. So that means, trying to underline, different enzymes respond differently to the same kind of a treatment. So we have to standardize and again, not just the concentration, but it is also a game of size. Smaller the size, higher is the efficacy. This is just a hypothesis, like how do we present, this is just a hypothesis, how do we present that what nanoparticles are doing inside a cell. Now coming down to this thing, what we did was, as we were saying earlier, that by using these silver and gold nanoparticle formulations, we were able to enhance the seed production by 17%. Then by now I should have been a rich person going into the business. But when I presented these results in it was a DBT sponsored project. So when I presented these results in DBT, they asked me, Sandeep, फील्ड में गोल्ड छिड़कोगे? लोगों को गोल्ड पहनने के लिए नहीं मिलता, तुम फील्ड में छिड़कोगे? Do you think, are you out of your senses? And when we actually calculated this cost to benefit ratio of using gold for enhancing the productivity, it turned out their concept turned out to be true, that it was not a viable product. It was not a viable project. Okay, neither it was a good product in terms of scientific discovery, that it was able to enhance the productivity, but it was not viable from a farmer's point of view, because it was not able to cover up the cost required to develop a nano formulation and to spray it also. But what we could not realize at that point of time was that we were talking about development of a product in lab. The dynamics of developing a product in lab are totally different from developing a product in a manufacturing facility, because they will not be using sigma particles for developing any particular product. So that's what we were not able to understand at that point of time. And once we finished our product, within 6 months, this particular product was available in market. And to tell you कि वो क्या कहते हैं ना उसको जले पे नमक छिड़कना, तो उसके लिए, and they sent this product to us to test its efficacy in field conditions. Being an agriculture university, I got this option from this particular company that could you please check the efficacy of our nanogold, because you have been using this you have been indulging in nanoparticle mediated enhancement in growth and productivity. So could you do it for us? Of course, I didn't agree to that, but this was where we failed to understand that there has to be a cross linkage between science and business. So both the things, one person cannot be an expert in both. We have to cross talk. We have to talk to people from industry if we want our product to be successful. Now, at this point of time, what I can tell you is that we started our discussion with a point that I will give you a solution for not washing your clothes quite often. And I would like to end up this discussion, or not discussion, but a monologue, with a point that nanotechnology is one technology which can make your doctor to advise you to eat junk food, because it will not lose the taste, but it will remove all the harmful effects and will inculcate most of the biologicals which can enhance your immunity and growth. So that way, even by eating junk food, you will be able to have taste as well as health benefits.